Hi, friends. Logan Clements here, one of your co hosts with the Better Events podcast. And in this week's episode, we are talking all about time management as an event pro. Think of this as time management 101. We're going to be diving into a little bit more about where to spend your time in next week's episode. But this week, we're going to be talking all about how we manage planning multiple events, time tracking, how do we manage our time when we're on site, and just some different tactics that we use as event planners when we're in our busy seasons versus our slower seasons. So stick around.
Welcome to the Better Events Podcast. Join two event strategists, Logan Clements and Mary Davidson, who believe we can all create, host, and attend better events. In this podcast, you will learn about event strategy and actions that you can use today as an event host, planner, or manager. Hear directly from the people who are creating innovative and inspiring events today and tomorrow, and grow your business along the way. Now, let's get started, and thanks for listening to the Better Events Podcast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Better Events Podcast this week. This is your co-host, Mary Davidson, and I'm joined by fellow co-host, Logan Clements, and we are thrilled to be with you. We are going to be talking about time management, but before we get into it, as you know, we have our conversation starter. So, Logan, hello. Our question for today is, what's your favorite place that you visited so far this year?
This is a tough one. I've been recently... I feel like this spring, I joke, I went to all the villes. I was in Louisville, Nashville, Charlottesville, Greenville, all the villes this year. But my favorite is getting to revisit Chile for vacation. That's where I was last year for a project. And I was very much in work mode. And something I'm trying to work on this year is savoring and slowing down a bit. And taking in the moment. And I didn't really get to do that as much as I think I would have liked. So it was really fun to have already been there for the work context. So I was comfortable, but then to go back with friends and we wine tasted and went to the beach and just kind of had a really lovely time in Chile, mainly around the Santiago area. But my partner and I, we went to Easter Island and got to see these really cool statues. So it was both adventuring, but also relaxing. So that would be my favorite one. Mary, how about you? What's your favorite place so far this year?
I'm trying to remember where I've been. I think I will say it feels like an obvious answer, but I went to Spain recently, and I'm going to say Spain because it has been a place on my bucket list. So now I can say I've been to Spain. I didn't get to see very much, but at least I've been there, and now I know I want to go back. So I'll say that was probably the funnest place I've been this year so far.
Yeah, a little bit of international destinations for us, which I feel like to our listeners shouldn't be too much of a surprise. But before we jump into why we're talking about this week's topic, we do want to plug our Better Events community that we launched. This is a paid community. You can first subscribe for free. You just don't get access to some of these cool benefits, like the bonus content that we're dropping once a month. We dropped an interview with our moms last month, and June we have another fun. Think of it as a little bit more of either deep dives, a little bit more personal, maybe a little bit more honest and raw for our private community. But if you are someone who's found any value out of what we've been bringing you so far with this podcast, it's a great way to continue to support Mary and I on this creative journey. It's $75 a year or $8 a month, whichever fits what you're looking for. And that paid version would get you access to our private community as well to connect with other event pros. So, why are we talking about time management, Mary? I feel like when I was thinking about this, I was like, time management and events go together like peanut butter and jelly, because events just have a lot of things that go on, a lot of things that got to happen. And so we're kind of doing this as a two-parter. This week, we're talking about time management 101 and just kind of a general overview. And then Mary had a really fun idea that next week, we're going to kind of do more of a this or that of what to invest your time in, because we're all busy people, especially as business owners, but event pros in general. So think of this as a broad overview. We're going to be kind of talking through what Mary and I do, and neither of us are experts, but I feel like it's helpful to hear what our journeys have been with time management, and hopefully you pick up a tip or a trick or two. So Mary, how would you define time management?
How would I define it, or how would ChatGPT define time management? You better believe I looked it up. Time management is the process of planning and exercising conscious control over the amount of time spent on specific activities with the aim of increasing efficiency, productivity, and effectiveness. I mean, amen. I think that's a great definition. Well, how about you, Logan? What would you add to ChatGPT's definition?
As we know, ChatGPT is all-knowing of many things, but I think in my layman's terms, it's how I spend my time. That is what I would say time management is. Whether it's good time management, poor time management, but it's just kind of we all have the same amount of time in a day, in a week, in a month, in a year, and so whatever we're doing to, spend our time on things.
Yeah, I love the simplicity of that. Love it, love it, love it. All right, so then how in the pre-planning phase, we're talking about events, how do we manage our own time? Logan, what do you do?
So yeah, a lot of what I do with events is that I like to estimate my hours that I'm spending on a project, and then I build that into a project rate for what I'm working on. So in the pre-planning phase for an event, it usually varies based on what that scope of work is. I know some folks I work with need very little hand holding in the pre-event process, and they're really just looking for that help on site and executing and having me show call or be in a specific role. And then I have others that really want me present and there for any and all calls about anything and all related to the event, even if it's not directly related to what I'm doing. And so for me, it's really important just to get a handle on what that pre-planning expectation is. And then for me, I'm trying to work on then how do I map all my different projects over each other? Because I think something we're going to chat about a little bit more, but managing different timelines, different phases, how am I on site for one event, but still doing pre-planning for another. So I think I work pretty typical hours. I wouldn't say a 9 to 5 just because events sometimes come on the weekends, but I do often have calls for what we're doing, a lot of Zoom calls, a lot of, that kind of stuff. And I feel like that falls in that traditional work window for when I'm doing some of that stuff, but very broad overview. So Mary, how about you?
Yeah, similarly, I think the biggest thing that takes time in the pre-planning process are the meetings. And those are also the things that I'm most strict about, I guess, in the scope of work. So usually we really identify beforehand, like how often and how many. And typically it's 2 a month until we get closer to the event. And then we start weekly 1 hour meetings. And being at that explicit just like gives me, I think, sanity because what takes so much time out of our workdays are meetings so that we can't execute tasks. And that was a problem that we came into last year. And so, really being firm on that in the pre planning phase has been helpful. And then, additionally, just tracking hours. So, we've talked about this in previous episodes, but how we kind of like scope out our services and things. I don't usually do hourly rates, so clients don't normally have a like full understanding of how long a project is going to take us. They just know that flat rate, that project rate. But internally, we are trying to do better at tracking the hours so that I can make sure we're making money on these events and the time that we put into them. It's a constant challenge, but it's something that we are trying to do. And that has been pretty eye-opening. And so that's the other part of how we manage the time is by tracking it so we know exactly where we're at. And then I will say, just in general with pre-planning, that's where I'm most flexible in the time. Like, scope creep obviously isn't great, but I just naturally find myself, I'm not saying this is the way to do it, but I find myself being okay and more flexible with time, spending more time, less time.
Yeah, I think I want to dive in there, Mary, a little bit. You mentioned time tracking because I think, again, we had that episode about how you and I have structured our businesses differently, but the fact that both of us do time tracking, and I guess I'll share first a little bit more of what I do in that process, and then I'll kick it over to you. But I first learned about tracking my time when I worked at an agency, a larger group. I'd worked at a couple agencies and some kind of loosely, that my first one loosely tracked time. We would just literally verbally estimate. And then my last agency before I went on my own did actual, like every day they wanted to know what we were tracking our time to, whether it was billable to a client or if it was something internal that we were doing, kind of to Mary's point of trying to figure out if they're charging enough to cover our salaries. Like I didn't make more by working more hours, but they were trying to cover what they were paying us. And so that's how I like first learned about it. And then that kind of blew my mind when I was tracking my time of being like, wow, I can really see where my hours are going. And then when I went on my own, I kind of had a even more bigger aha moment where I realized I was like very efficient. Like time tracking was helpful in just keeping me honest, but that I could be really efficient and not work 40 hours a week and still be doing a large amount of work. So it was like not just trying to number crunch every single minute of the day just to make sure I filled everything. It was more to realize my efficiency and like people paying me a certain amount because I'd be more efficient. I could do it in half an hour versus someone else who would take 2 hours, but I should still be charging for the 2 hours because it's my expertise and my efficiency. And so now, and I was doing that manually in like a Google spreadsheet. And I did manually all the way up until 2019. And then I had a client who wanted us to use Toggle, Toggl. I've talked about them here on the podcast. And that was a way that they wanted us to track our time. And it just lets you export reports. It does a lot of the math for you of what you're spending your time on. And that was just really easy to download and send it to a client who wanted some visibility into how much time we were spending on the project. Since then, I use Toggle now religiously. It has this timer feature. It also lets you go back in and just input hours. And so some days I'm perfect and I start my timer, end my timer, down to the minute. And other times I realize I didn't track anything all day. I'm going to go back loosely and try to think about my meetings and what I kind of jumped to. And that's just helpful to have those buckets to show what I'm tracking to. So I'll stop there. Mary, how about you with time tracking?
Yeah, I track in ClickUp, which is our project management software. There's a time tracking column that you can add in, and you can link it so it like tracks to a database, like a dashboard, I think. So like it'll say the client name and how many overall hours that you've spent. It isn't amazing at breaking down like who spent the hours and like what each hour was, but it does give you a total, which was better than nothing, which is what we were doing before was nothing. So that's what we've been working with so far. But yeah, I think everyone kind of does it differently. I think most of us are going back and logging it. Like we finish a meeting and we go put in an hour, like that type of thing. I have tried to do like the live time tracking because you can, just pressing play, whatever, the start button, like Logan was saying. And then I let it run for like 2 days and I go back and it says, like 48 hours. And I'm like, dang it. So I've found I'm better going back and just adding the time in. But I think, yeah, the key is to remember. And yes, that's how we do it in ClickUp.
Yeah, I think it's just a helpful tool if you're an event pro, whether you're internal or external. For me, I will say when I was internal, it was actually really helpful for me when I was trying to go in to ask for a raise to have something to go back to say, hey, I am working. I mean, at that point, my boundaries were really bad. So I definitely was working more than 40 hours, but I had something to show for the amount of time I was working. That wasn't just me verbally saying, hey, I think I'm taking on a lot at work and still performing. I had numbers. So it's just something to explore if that's interesting for you to do time tracking.
So how do we manage planning multiple events at once? You alluded to that earlier, Logan. So what are some of the things that you do?
We have to do a lot of split brain as event planners. Even if you're internal, I feel like you're probably planning at different phases with each project. So for me, I can't do something as simple as like just on Tuesdays, I work on event number A, event A. On Wednesdays, I work on event B. On other days, I work on event C. Like I definitely have to work on almost everything every day. So for me with time management, I feel like right now meetings have become a big one. And I know, Mary, you're very good at saying it's only so many meetings with people, but with for what I do in production with agencies, it's usually a little bit more blanket. They have less boundaries, I would say, than most companies. So it's more of a big chunk of hours. Like you have 300 hours to plan this event. And with those 300 hours are covering all these meetings. And I have just found from working with agencies, you're going to have more meetings than something that you do independent and that you're setting your own scope for. And so my meetings kind of are my anchor each week. And then I try to look at what my big tasks are for each event I'm working. And I've tried to be better at, and I've gotten better over the years at them blocking out time on my calendar so that other agencies and people don't schedule time, but to do deeper things like building a run a show. It's one of those things where it could take me 15 hours of me being scatterbrained and being pulled in on other tasks and emails and bopping between meetings. Or I've learned like if I just sit down and crank it out, I can do it in an hour or two if I have all the tools. And so that's one for me. I've tried to make better blocks of time to do that deeper work and protect that time, and then also help myself realize that on days when I'm on like 6 calls, I'm not going to do my best outside of call work because I'm just constantly switching projects and things like that. So I'll stop there. Mary, what do you have when you're managing your multiple events?
Yeah, similar to you, it's definitely blocking meetings out as far as that I can, because like we said, they are what can take the most time. And so if I know I'm coming in to a season where there all are many events happening at the same time, and some of them are at the same stages, like during busy seasons, it's very common that we'll have like 2 events in a week and they're the same kind of event. And so we are literally doing the same thing at the same time for many of them, which actually is kind of helpful, to be honest, because then we're just like working on the same thing no matter what the project is. But blocking the meetings out, of course, as far in advance as we can. Always getting a debrief on the calendar is super great. That's something where if we're turning around quick and doing another event, have that debrief from the other event that we finished already on the calendar helps it so we're not just like bye to a client, like there's a really established end meeting. And then also, now this is again coming in to like the different structure that I've started recently with the business, and that is having more of a team. And so also splitting up the team's time has been super helpful when managing multiple events at once. So I have kind of shifted where for a while we all were going to all the meetings because there's been training periods and things like that. But now we're at the stage where we don't all need to go to everything. That's not a good use of our time, nor is it me budgeting for 3 people for all of these meetings. And so we can split up our time, and that helps us manage multiple events at once. And not everybody obviously has that, but that's just the stage that we're in right now, which has been helpful to take on more.
Nice. Yeah, that is one that I'm like on the agency side. Yeah, there's 10 of us on a call and they are getting billed for all 10 people's time. So just something you kind of factor in. I think for me too, just thinking through time management through multiple events, Mary got me into ClickUp. So that's a really easy way that I have we talked about event strategy in a past episode where I have different workbooks for each project because they're all different. They all need access to different things, but my ClickUp turns into my like one place to look after everything. And then I also am a big paper planner person, but I do also have a paper notebook that right now it's a little light. I'm just working on like a couple of projects. So it's a traveler's notebook that has these lovely handy dandy, if you're on YouTube watching me, um, little center stretchy pieces. So I can actually put in different notebooks and it all lives in one big notebook, but I have all these sub ones. And that's really helpful because I like to take handwritten notes during meetings when I can. That just helps it stick in my brain. And so having a different notebook for each event or client has helped me jump from project to project when I need to and have it not intermixed amongst them, which when I first started, I used to have one notebook that had all my meeting notes. But I found myself having to constantly like flip through to try to figure out, okay, when was the last time we met? What did we talk about? And now it's like sequential in each notebook. And then I just restock when I get new events and I recycle them when I'm done. And that just kind of keeps my notes separate.
Yeah. So then what are some tips for managing our time when on site? Because we've planned the event, now we're on site. And what do we do? And I have to say, Logan, I would be so remiss if at this time I didn't say I am late to everything. So I am not good at managing my time on site. Mornings are really hard. I'm not super late, but I'm always like 5 minutes late. So it's something that I'm trying to work on. That's my confession I have to get out. I can't just sit here and not say that because everyone who knows me knows it's true. So, Logan,
And
give me some tips.
yeah, well, I mean, and you're not alone. There are event planners that I would say are great at time management, and yet personally, yes, are going to be running 5-10 minutes late. It's a good that you're aware of it. I think for me, yeah, managing time when you're on site, you've ideally already made an on-site schedule, and that factors in all of your times a day of load-ins, when other vendors are coming in, and all of that when you're the event pro, making sure that you're factoring all of that in and then figuring out what time you personally need and factoring that in, for buffer. So say you have your teams coming at 11 a.m., but you need to have all these things printed and an office set up for them and all these things, and you got to work forward and, do it, make sure you're there at 9 or whatever it is. And so for me, it's mainly just like planning it out. And then this is where Mary, I think I credit sports because in sports with practice, if you were on time, you were late. And if you were late, it usually meant we had to run sprints or something. There was some physical punishment for not being on time that definitely has trickled into my professional life, where I definitely, like, I recently was producing a show and it was like, think there was only one day of the 6 days that I wasn't 30 minutes early, because I would just rather be there and be set, have my bag undone, like got my coffee, whatever it is, and I'm settled while other people are streaming in at the 7 o'clock time. But one of my pro tips, I guess, aside from personal things, would be, this is again from a production perspective, but it's probably good to factor in no matter what part of planning you do for your event team, is have your call time 30 minutes prior to whatever you actually need them to be ready. So it's very common in the production world that we will do a call time of 7 a.m. with the plan that we're doing a tech run through, a speaker rehearsal, something at 7:30. So what we usually, like in the jargon I've seen used, it's like power up. So crew call time at 7, power up and work notes until 7:30. And just that 30 minutes of buffer, again, I think meets people where they're at. So if you are a Mary who maybe runs 5 minutes late, you're still on time for that 7:30. Or if you're someone who needs coffee or to turn something on or run to the restroom, like it just builds in some of that transition time that we naturally as humans usually need. And that'll then avoid you running behind. And I do the same thing if I have volunteers that are working for me. I usually put that call time minimum 15 minutes earlier than I actually need them, just again to buffer for the people who have trouble parking, got stuck in traffic, whatever it is, so that you're able to still be running on time and not put yourself behind from the jump, because that's really frustrating as an event professional.
Yeah, totally. The one thing that we do in our timeline, like our day of timeline, is have that set and ready time. And we call it set and ready. And it's like always an hour before doors open, which feels like way too much time. And I love it that way. Like in an ideal world, like all the vendors are there, all the volunteers are there, everybody's set, they've been trained, and we're literally standing waiting for the event to begin for an hour. Like that's my dream on-site event. So that is one thing we do. And usually we're kind of on time with it because we're already there. But that's, like at 4:30 p.m. usually. So easier to accomplish. But Logan, are you gonna make me do sprints next time I'm working for you?
I am not gonna make you do sprints. I just think it's when I like reflect of like where it comes from. And I was I used to have like a physical punishment that we had to do. And so it is one, because I've noticed I like being on time. I get personally stressed if I'm even like close to the actual call time, because I'm so used to I like being there early. And let's just say, Mary, then you're working on being on time. I then have to work on being more open to why some folks aren't coming on time and are only a few minutes late, because that's just like a me thing that I know. But I definitely, sports has taught me to be there early, and then that it how I view it, it's like a respect thing, being like, I'm respectful of your time. I try not to call you in super early. I think a bad practice of time management for some event pros is they penalize those people and make the call time something even like an hour earlier than you're actually needed.
Oof, that's hard. Yeah.
And then you have the people that come on time end up just sitting around for an hour, which feels disrespectful to them, and the people are coming late.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I'm always good with a good 5 minutes, something happens, you've texted me letting me know you're on your way. But if we're working together every day for 2 weeks and it's consistently every day, probably on the third time, it's like, hey, do you want me to tell you your call time's 15 minutes earlier than it needs to be?
You're out. That's what I'm.
Well, I always just bring it's like team morale thing is more what I say. It's just, again, for the team, it's really nice to be on time. And so you want to make sure you're building in, and it sounds like, Mary, you already have the awareness. So you purposely build in for yourself, I think, a sliding start time for things. Just knowing yourself. So I think that's one for time management. And then I would make sure you actually make notes, just as an event professional, for both yourself and then anyone that who bills you hourly. Make sure in real time you're writing down when you start and when you end. This is really helpful in that post-event process of reconciling expenses. If you have an unexpected overtime charge from somebody, maybe your venue or something, and you're like, no, I wrote it down. We got done at 10, you can't charge me till 11. Now, the pro tip here is if you finish at 10:10, most places round up. So you get charged the full hour. And some vendors will do a half hour overage, but I found a lot round up to the nearest hour. So that's just really helpful. In the moment, give the gift to future you of writing down and noting some of these times. Also, if you're someone who's feeling like they're not getting what you thought you did, maybe a photographer told you 10 hours on site, again, I'm not saying to nitpick, but this is just helpful information. I've always found more information is better than none, so that afterward you're not trying to sit there and scratch your head of like, when did I see these people?
Yeah, I think that's a great tip, and I've seen you do that, and it is helpful. So, do you have different tactics for busy seasons versus slow seasons? Because there are definitely those, and it depends what kind of events you do, but I think we all experience busy versus slow seasons. So, what do you do to manage your time during those?
I mean, we've talked about it, Mary, right? We love a summer Friday.
What we'd love a summer Friday.
And that's like, so Summer Fridays listeners, we've probably talked about it here on the podcast, is like taking the day off on Fridays and not working on Fridays. Or maybe just if for you, if you still have to work, maybe not taking calls on Fridays. I know another event pro, that's their thing. They don't do calls on Fridays at all. And so I think for me, time management wise, it is one where I feel like I've gotten to the point where I'm breaking up from just being proud that I'm busy. And so knowing when there isn't a lot to do that week, we talked about, you love to get ahead. It's great to like pay it off to future you, but sometimes there's truly like, you can't be doing stuff. So why sit at your desk on your inbox trying to get work done? Go outside, go do something else, like turn off. I'm still working through some of the, like, I feel like the innate guilt I get sometimes from getting to do that on like a Tuesday afternoon, being like, last call was at 2, I'm done. There's nothing immediate and urgent I have to get done, and I'm tired, so I'm going to go do something else. So that's definitely, I'm a work in progress on being flexible with that kind of stuff. But I do encourage you, my burnout from 2021, I felt like I didn't do that. I just thought more was better. If I had free time, I should be working, I should be doing something. And it kind of snowballed really, really quickly. So thinking about that. And then for me, it's also adding in after really long events, like multi-week events, or even like a 4-day event. I now try to add in recovery time, is what I call it on my calendar. And I literally block my calendar. And if it's a full day, I'll tell people I'm out of the office. But sometimes I found even the smallest shift of just saying after 1:00 Pacific time, my time, I'm done. So I will do what I need to get done from 9 to 1. And that's usually enough time to wrap up the event, keep my other events moving forward where they need to go. But I learned that the hard way from having too many things back to back to back and not having that time just to like recharge my batteries in whatever way that means. Alone time, time with friends. How about you, Mary?
I would say that I don't enjoy trying to fill people's time. Like for me, slow seasons I love because they give me the opportunity to reorganize everything, to relook at our like goals and how we're doing, and then also just to sell, like to try to get business. And I really love the brain space to be able to do things like that. But for the team, I hated when things were slow when I was employed, and so they would just fill my time with like random crap. So anything that we do, I want it to be intentional, but I also think it's fine to take a break right now. Like it's okay if days are slower. And so trying to communicate that to anybody who needs to know, like it's okay if it's slower right now, that's purposeful. We don't want anybody to burn out. Like take a little bit of a break. But also during this time, here are some things that we can work on. And so we've started something called a parking lot where everybody puts their ideas of like things we want to work on when we have time. And it's like anybody's idea. It could be building out vendor lists, like getting on the venue's preferred vendor lists, like things like that. And this slow season gives us the opportunity to do that, which I actually love. But when it's busy, just got to power through. I mean, I don't know. It's just busy. But honestly, I love that there is a balance sometimes. I love that it's like a slow season or a busy season. I don't know. It helps me shift my brain and refocus on different priorities, and I enjoy that.
And I think what you just said there, season, is an important part that, like, again, the time tracking for me was eye-opening because I'd be like, wow, I'm really tired after these events, but I loved it. Let me look. And it's like, I worked 100 hours a week these 3 weeks. And you're like, who does this compare to? Like bankers on Wall Street are working 100 hours a week. And it's like, that's unsustainable for a long time. So it makes sense that you want to kind of inverse and slow down and have that slow season. But I love that parking lot idea, Mary. I hope some listeners apply that if they are somebody who maybe works a more traditional 40 hours a week kind of job and needs to fill, like you said, fill some of that time. But before we wrap up, Mary, have your strategies for managing your own time evolved since you've started and now grown your business?
Yes, definitely. I'll say that there's like 4 things that come to mind that I will call out. And one thing that's changed is when we kind of talked about this earlier, but when you're working with a potential client, something that I found that we've been able to do a couple times is pitching them to do 2 events for them instead of just 1, because we're already meeting with them. We're already working on this stuff, so we can have like less meetings because we can talk about 2 events in 1 meeting and be productive. But so I think like that's a cool situation for you to get like additional business or an additional event if if you have your own business. But then also what you said, Logan, like there was a moment when I told a client that I was like, well, we've already done 1 event for you, so we can do it faster this time. So it's going to be cheaper for you. So I immediately like decreased our value. And that was a hard lesson learned because I was like, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. So I had to learn that one the hard way. And you mentioned that earlier, but I've also experienced it. So I wanted to call that out, that now I know we are charging the value of our time. And then also, I'm surprised, I don't think we've talked about this yet this episode, but just like doing time blocking in our schedules. That's not something I'm great at, but it is something that I have tried to do at periods of time. And I know that some people really swear by it. But the biggest thing that has shifted is that I'm truly trying to work 8:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. And I'm surprised that I'm putting in a more full work day, actually. When I started, I used to work, like 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., but maybe that was because there was like less going on. But now I feel like to get what I need to get done, I have to at least work 8:30 p.m. to 4 p.m. But like that's my boundary. Like those are the times that I want to schedule meetings within. That has changed the most. I don't know if that's like a strategy per se, but it's definitely something that has been newer, but I also think has helped me manage my time. Having set hours has encouraged me to be more productive within those.
Those are all, yeah, really good ones. I think a strategy that's helped me over the years has been to realize that the to-do list will never get done. Like it'll never be 0. It is one that, yes, the to-dos for a specific event will always get 0 because we're going to finish it, but there's always more things to do. So your talk of a parking lot is one that I think I've had to realize I just have to be okay with certain things not happening. And that's taking some of the stress off from me. So I talked about ClickUp. I used to manage tasks, but I do also use my paper passion planner, which you guys know I love. And I've started to try to be visually a little bit more reasonable with my time. So I like split my days in half and I write in all my meetings. I do this on Fridays for the upcoming week. And then that only leaves, probably 8 lines for me to write to-dos for that day. And I found if I get to the point where I have more than those 8 lines to fill with to-dos, I'm probably not going to get them done. And I got to figure out priorities. And in this busy spring season, I started just even taking a highlighter and highlighting the one thing I had to get done. Like if nothing else gets done today, I have to do this task. And it would usually be different each day. And that was really helpful for me with like task management and just focusing. Because when you're busy, it can turn into little fires everywhere for different events and immediate urgencies. I don't think I'm as structured as you are, Mary, with my hours that I do. And that's, I guess, not necessarily a pro, but I have tried to be a little bit more structured, with what I'm tackling each day. The time tracking is really just insightful for me. I'm almost obsessed with it. I feel like for understanding where my time goes, trying to go back even for onsite events, because it's just a gift to future me when I'm trying to, like you said, budget for the next year event. If I'm repeating with the client, having that for me really helps. And you're not alone, listeners. Hopefully that resonated with what Mary said about saying, oh, you could do it for cheaper because it's less hours. But the framing I always tell myself is, sure, I did it in less, but for you to start with a new person, it would take the same as it took me year 1. So it's still, again, the value of what you're bringing to the table. And then, I definitely right now, I work more than I did when I first started my business. I'm busier. I also think calls have kind of gotten all over the place and I don't know if that's necessarily in a good way. There's productive calls where we're actually getting through things. And then there's just being on calls for visibility. And that's just with production and producing. I found that role with some of the work I do with agencies, that's part of it, is just being seen and being, on these calls and things like that. So I've just been trying to factor those in when I'm tracking my time. And planning, how my weeks are going. But I'm definitely tracking more weekly hours than I did a couple years ago. And I don't know if that's necessarily a positive. I'm still undecided as we are in June right now. I'm interested to see as I get towards the end of the year with that side of things. But I guess I should also point out, I do track like the time we spend on this podcast. I'm now tracking, I wasn't doing it at the start, but I think about a year ago, I started tracking what I was spending on YouTube. And these are all things I talked about. A goal this year is to try to outsource some tasks that I do as a solo person. And I am trying to get a handle on how much of my time is spent on some of these things that, yes, I need to record the video, but do I need to edit it? Or do I need to post it? Or do I need somebody else to help me with some of that stuff? So we're constantly, I guess, big takeaway listeners is we're constantly evolving. Neither Mary or I are experts of time management. But I feel like tracking has been a really helpful tool for me just to keep myself honest. And so that I don't get those rose colored glasses post event and be like, they didn't take any time at all. And it gives me confidence when I've had some people push back because I'm a little more transparent. It sounds like, Mary, than you are in my proposals of saying this includes 20 hours because I kind of blanket meetings and that. And I've had a client come back and say, hey, I don't think it takes you 25 hours. I think we only need you 8 to 10 hours. And then I've realized I've had to say, yes, maybe in those 8 to 10 hours of meetings, but I am prepping, I'm doing post meeting things. I have tasks that have to happen that aren't, accounted for in a meeting. So I'm not comfortable dropping it lower. I think I dropped it down to 20 instead of 25 and they accepted that. So whatever your method is, just be ready to back it up.
I love it. So many great tips and tricks. So listeners, hopefully you took some tips and tricks away from all of this as well. Always room to improve. All righty. So for the bonus tip for today, do you still get business cards? I bet you do. I know that we're trying to move away from business cards, but I don't think that's going to happen for a really long time. I still get a ton. I still give out a ton. So my guess is you get business cards when you meet people. My advice is to put them in a spreadsheet to track vendors and potential partners over time. We've kind of mentioned something like this before as a bonus tip, but recently, literally, we get a business card, we put it in a spreadsheet. It's been like an immediate action, and that has been super helpful. And it eliminates, that stack that you'll end up getting on your desk or something like that. So we've done a lot of networking lately, and that has cut us a lot. It saved us a lot of time. So there you go. That is our bonus tip for today.
Feel like that's like time blocking after you go to an event. Just have a little time block there, Mary, like you mentioned, to take action. I love it. Well, that brings us to the end of this week's episode. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Better Events Pod. You can send us an email at bettereventspod@gmail.com. You can connect with us on LinkedIn directly as well. Mary and I love hearing from you. And this is our friendly reminder that we do have a paid community that you can access via Substack. So click the link in our show notes to go join us over there for more bonus content and a really fun upcoming virtual meetup that we're going to be doing once a quarter. And as always, we want to thank you for listening, and we'll be back in your feeds again next Wednesday.